Welcome all to the latest PANGEA-RISK webinar. My name is Gabrielle Reid, and I am the company's Chief Strategy and Growth Officer, as well as head of our global advisory practice. I am joined today by Saif Islam, our head of Asia forecasting, and Jack Brodsky, our country risk analyst based out in Europe. Today, we will look at recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as well as the sort of broader geopolitical context that conflict is taking place in. As many of you will be aware, PANGEA-RISK has recently expanded our country risk coverage to include both Russia and Ukraine on our Insight platform. And this reflects our growing commitment to supporting clients operating in or exposed to this complex region. So let's get started. Now, there's been a lot of attention around possible deal in Ukraine, largely off back of some of the discussions that we saw in Davos. So, Saif, I want to start with you. Given extensive speculation around the possibility of a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and of course the fact that there have been numerous rounds of talks involving Russia, Ukraine, the US, as well as European officials, which have taken place in recent months. If there is a peace agreement reached this year, what would be Ukraine's foremost demand in terms of such a settlement?
Hi, Gabby. Yeah, sure. I think Ukraine's primary demand right now is credible and enforceable security guarantees. And these guarantees must prevent renewed Russian military action and protect Ukraine's long-term sovereignty as an independent state. So I think that's the core issue for Ukraine. And without such guarantees, any ceasefire would risk becoming a temporary pause rather than a lasting end to the war. Another key issue for Ukraine is obviously territorial integrity. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has repeatedly said in public that Ukraine would never formally concede any of its territory to Russia. In practical terms, Ukraine will probably have to make some compromises on that front. And it'll be interesting to see how that compromise is defined and characterized. And I think that the extent to which Ukraine makes compromises on land will likely depend on the type of security guarantees it receives from its allies.
Thank you, Saif. Certainly a very complex situation. But Jack, I want to bring you in here for your assessment from more of a European perspective. If we look at right now, European governments are confronting almost a dual strategic environment or strategic challenges. On the one side, we've seen relations with the US become increasingly complicated over issues like tariffs and, of course, more recently, Greenland and other matters. And then on the other hand, we have Russia, who continues to pursue its maximalist objectives in Ukraine, prompting concern among European policymakers regarding the potential for future aggression. How do you assess European leaders will manage both foreign and domestic security pressures over the coming year?
Thank you, Gabby. And as you rightly point out, it's been a busy start to the year for European leaders. The fracturing relations with the US over Greenland, tariffs, the Board of Peace, Chagos Islands, and other issues mean that we stand on very different ground compared to where we ended 2025. Now, having seemingly averted the possibility of one NATO state invading another, albeit for the moment, the European priority regarding US relations will be looking to resume the agreement on trade. And hopefully this will happen after the dust settles after a challenging week in Davos. In terms of Russia-Ukraine, I think previously stated commitments from the EU to Ukraine remain intact. On the 21st of January, the European Parliament backed the Union's $105 billion loan, which will help provide military and budgetary assistance and make up an estimated $63 billion shortfall in the Ukrainian budget for the 2026-27 financial year. In terms of domestic priorities elsewhere in Europe, press headlines have focused on how member countries should be prepared for a surge in Russian hybrid warfare over the coming year. Here in the UK, the National Cybersecurity Centre reiterated how Russian or Russian-enabled hacktivist groups will continue and likely continue to target critical infrastructure or attempt to weaken democratic institutions through information interference. Now, this makes sense for a number of reasons. Firstly, towards the end of 2025, the data shows that Russian troop losses increased at a much higher rate compared to 2024, indicating a strain on military resources. And second, the historical evidence of Russian state-linked financing of different European political parties to drive polarization and amplify pro-Russian sentiment. And of course, flashpoints for this will be elections over the coming year, whether in Slovenia, Latvia, Estonia, Sweden, Bosnia and Herzegovina, will all likely be targeted by this electoral interference and subversion. So really, for European countries, securing the national information environment and building resilience will be a priority in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Jack. It is certainly a pivotal moment for Europe, and as you say, it's been a busy January. Saif, a final question for you, perhaps more on the commercial side. As we know, the Ukrainian government has recently awarded a major lithium mining project to a consortium of investors that is linked to the US. How do you view this development in the context of Ukraine's broader potential to attract foreign direct investment in time?
Sure. I mean, as we all know, the commercial operating environment in Ukraine is complex, particularly near the front lines, because the country is in a war. There are concerns relating to infrastructure damage, power supply. But with all that said, I think this deal is a positive development for the country's mining sector and for the wider economy. It builds on the US-Ukraine Mineral Resources Agreement signed in August last year, and it fits into a broader effort by Ukraine to retain the political and financial backing of its Western partners. According to the World Economic Forum, Ukraine has approximately 20,000 mineral deposits, including rare earths, and most of these remain largely undeveloped, which means there are genuine long-term commercial opportunities in Ukraine. There is also interest from stakeholders who want to be involved in Ukraine's reconstruction. But the bottom line is, just like the Ukrainian people, investors need certainty. They want credible security guarantees. And if they feel that the conflict could resume at any point, even after a peace agreement, they will obviously be quite hesitant to deploy their capital.
Thank you, Saif. And thank you both for such an insightful discussion today. To our audience, we appreciate your time and engagement. I think the evolving geopolitical dynamics surrounding the Russia-Ukraine conflict continue to present some clear, complex challenges, but hopefully some opportunities in time as well. At PANGEA-RISK, we remain committed to providing timely, objective, and actionable analysis to support your strategic decision-making in perhaps this volatile environment and others as well. We look forward to welcoming you to future sessions, but until then, thank you once again, Saif, Jack, and of course, all of you joining today. Goodbye.